is an internist, cardiologist, epidemiologist, managing the cardiovascular complications of both the viral infection and the injuries developing after the COVID-19 vaccine in Dallas, Texas. Since the outset of the pandemic, Dr. McCullough has been a leader in the medical response to the COVID-19 disaster and has published pathophysiological basis and rationale for early outpatient treatment of SARS-CoV-2 COVID-19 infection, the first synthesis of sequenced multi-drug treatment of ambulatory patients infected with SARS-CoV-2 in the American Journal of Medicine, and subsequently updated in reviews in cardiovascular medicine. He has dozens of peer-reviewed publications on the infection and has commented extensively on the medical response to the COVID-19 crisis in The Hill, America Out Loud, and on Fox News Channel. On November 19, 2020, Dr. McCullough testified in the U.S. Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs. In 2021-2022, the Texas Senate Committee on Health and Human Services, Colorado General Assembly, New Hampshire Senate, Pennsylvania Senate, and South Carolina Senate concerning many aspects of the pandemic response. On January 24, 2022, Dr. McCullough co-moderated and testified in the U.S. Senate panel COVID-19, A Second Opinion, chaired by Senator Ron Johnson. Dr. McCullough has reviewed thousands of reports, participated in scientific congresses, group discussions, press releases, and has been considered among the world's experts on COVID-19. His book, written with best-selling true crime author John Leake, is Courage to Face COVID-19, Preventing Hospitalization and Death While Battling the Biopharmaceutical Complex. Dr. McCullough is currently in litigation, and to be clear, Dr. McCullough is not currently affiliated with or employed by Baylor Scott and White or Texas A&M or their related entities. Dr. McCullough requests that you do not state or write that he is affiliated with Baylor Scott and Wright, Texas A&M, TCU, UNT, or their related entities. I hope he realizes the importance of his work and what he's all done in our lives. I can't imagine what America would look like today if it wasn't for voices like Dr. Peter McCullough. So please welcome this extraordinarily heroic doctor who just flew in from Texas to be with us here in Grand Rapids, Dr. Peter McCullough.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I want to make sure my voice is going to be strong enough. Let me move up the microphone. Thanks to each and every one of you for attending today, and thanks for your patience and allowing my voice to be changed a bit with a recent infection. What I'm going to do today, and I will stay on time, is give you a comprehensive review on COVID-19 vaccine safety and efficacy and the rationale for why we still need to treat this illness early in high-risk patients, those presenting with severe symptoms. This is the base slide deck that was CME approved by the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons. It's been used in conferences worldwide. It's the same base slide deck that I showed Joe Rogan in the Joe Rogan Experience. I showed the Spotify producers. So, and these are available to you if you want them. They're on the conference computer. I'm happy to share them with you. And I volunteered to share these with the White House, the Surgeon General, the directors of the National Institutes of Health, anybody who criticized or made claims about misinformation based on the slides. The slides are completely cited. They've been vetted and curated, and we'll go through this together. My book is available outside. My wife is there at the table. COVID-19, Courage to Face COVID-19 while battling the biopharmaceutical complex. And it's a story about treating COVID-19 early, how the innovation occurred around the world, and how we were met with suppression for many, many stakeholders that we call the biopharmaceutical complex. It applies to so many doctors, nurses, and healthcare providers in the room, and I think it's a gateway book. It's not a medical book, so it's a story, but it's a true story, and it shows how everyone is involved in what's going on. There's a precedent for shutting down mass vaccination programs when they go bad. This one was with the swine flu pandemic, and just after a couple dozen deaths, there's several hundred cases of Guillain-Barré syndrome, it was stopped. So there is a safety standard here. We would never allow anything more than 50 deaths to occur at the end of any hypodermic needle. This is from the pharmacovigilance report by the World Council for Health. You can see a polio vaccine was pulled after 10 deaths. Swine flu, 53 deaths was the ultimate number. There's some drugs, Meridia, Posicor, diethylstilbestrol. One of the biggest ones was Vioxx. Vioxx turned not to be proven, but that was 66, 36 deaths. You can see with COVID-19 vaccines, the number of deaths that have occurred shortly afterward far exceeds any safety standard. Far and away, far and away. There is a willful blindness by all government stakeholders, CDC, NIH, FDA, and the White House Task Force, a willful blindness. Not a single government official has uttered the words that there have been a large number of deaths that have occurred. So I'll follow this outline, make a few points with respect to each one of these bullets. The first is about standards, regulatory standards of new biologic products. We always demand safety, safety, safety. I've chaired 24 data safety monitoring boards for the NIH and Big Pharma. I consider myself a safety expert. As introduced, I am an expert on COVID-19 and have as much experience with the illness as any infectious disease doctor or virologist at this point. But a new product entry, such as the vaccines, they must be safe. It doesn't matter how good they are. They must be safe. We would never ask somebody to voluntarily, or we would never mandate, or we would never force somebody to take an injection and have them lose their life. Never. There is no acceptability of that in human. People have tried to negotiate this and say, well, you could die of COVID. And I've always said, well, listen, you may or may not get COVID, and if you get it, we certainly can treat it. So it isn't a one-for-one. It wasn't like, listen, line up and lose your life with the vaccine or lose your life with COVID. It's not a one-for-one, and that argument fails. The summer before the vaccines were released, I published an editorial in The Hill, and I was invited by The Hill to publish a whole series of op-eds. And you can see the title, The Great Gamble of the COVID-19 Vaccine Development. This was the gamble of the century, if not a gamble of all time. The proposal that the entire world was going to be vaccinated against a highly prevalent respiratory illness. And in this editorial, I point out that vaccines against respiratory illnesses are not very successful. This year, the flu vaccine efficacy was 16%. The 13-valent pneumococcal vaccine protection against pneumonia was only 9%. Vaccine efficacy of 50% and having a vaccine last for a year, those are the minimal standards. If you can't get 50% protection, it's not worth any type of immunologic or safety risks. And so I pointed out the fact that, listen, a shot in the arm isn't going to do much for protection in the sinuses. Everyone knows that this is a sinus infection. It starts out that way. We needed protection up there with some type of mist, nasal mist. It wasn't a shot in the arm. That was a poorly conceived idea. Well, we now know that coronavirus is in a sense, a big ball, the nucleocapsid and the spike protein on the surface. But the two references on the bottom, I think, are the two most important references that basically indicate that this was man-made, that this was formed. And the papers are actually from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. The vast majority of the authors here are actually not Chinese. And so reading the literature on this, starting back from 2006 forward, this virus was intentionally modified with a fusion of a bat spike protein and the human coronavirus in order to make this spike protein far more invasive and lethal. And in these papers, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, was actually using animals that had a human epithelial lining in the respiratory tract, actually by design to try to make the virus infect human cells. It's right in the papers. You can just read it. This isn't a conjecture. And right along with it is the development of vaccines. So in each one of these papers, and they go back, there's actually one at University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston, where the first author is saying, where side by side they're trying to modify the virus and make a vaccine for it. Modify the virus, make a vaccine for it. It's in the published literature. This is funded by the National Institutes of Health division called BARDA, which is actually a biosafety division. And then there's a Department of Defense division called DARPA. These are the same divisions that actually funded the vaccine manufacturers. But my read on this is that some of the experimental work was done in China, but some was done in the United States, but very few Chinese investigators. The Chinese contribution appeared to be the bats. They had the bats caves, and some of that transfer work that happened in the Wuhan Institute of Virology lab in Wuhan, China. But this appears to be a US operation, okay? And I want you to understand that the vast majority of people on these signature lines here are American citizens. Now, the spike protein is where all the lethality of this illness is. It's 1,200 amino acids, about a dozen glycosylation side chains, about 4,000 base pairs code for it. And the only reason why this coronavirus has led to death is because of this spike protein. The ball is innocuous. We've had coronaviruses. I may actually have one that I'm finishing up right now. It's not lethal to me. But the spike protein is what makes it lethal. Now the vaccines, as shown here, on the left is the adenoviral vector vaccines, Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca, which inject the DNA which codes for the spike protein and makes the body produce the spike protein. The messenger RNA vaccines are on the right, and that's Pfizer and Moderna. They inject the messenger RNA to produce the spike protein. But the vaccines all produce the spike protein, which are those little red buds. Those buds are identical to the original Wuhan strain of the virus. The vaccines are producing the lethal part of the virus. The vaccines are the genetic code for the lethal protein that has killed millions of people worldwide. The vaccine provides the genetic code to produce the lethal protein for an uncontrolled duration of time and an uncontrolled quantity. When you think about that biologic ramification, that's the most risky vaccine anybody could ever come up with because it's completely uncontrolled. So in the wrong person at the wrong time, if they produce too much of it for too long of a time, it's going to be lethal. It will be lethal. It's a very different thing taking a killed influenza vaccine where the virus is dead, it can't kill you, or a tetanus toxoid vaccine where it's a limited amount of tetanus toxoid. This is a form of Russian roulette. And Marc Giordano in France has published on this that in a sense, every time someone takes a COVID vaccine, it's a Russian roulette. It's a statistical chance in them at this time, is it going to be lethal in the next few days? And everyone knows this. That's the reason why there's protests. That's the reason why the military won't take it. No one wants to take this chance. Every person who takes a shot waits for a few days and thinks, am I going to die or am I not? It's a horrible feeling. It's absolutely blood-curdling to think that this is going on. Now, one of the toughest questions I had from Joe Rogan was, well, listen, if these are so bad, how come everybody doesn't die after taking them? And I said, well, A, it's a side effect, so it's, if it happened in everybody, the world would be quite different right now. 2/3 of the world has taken one of these. And I didn't have a good answer at the time. That was back in December of last year, but I have a better understanding now working with molecular biologists. These vaccines are very unstable. They have to be super cooled. The genetic material is unstable. They're on lipid nanoparticles with preservatives. And when they went to the big public program, they went to multi-use vials. Nurses were poking needles in them. We didn't hear so much about the super cooling and the handling. My theory, and again, it's just a theory, is I think the majority of people actually, just by human error, receive a lot of inactive genetic material. And that's the reason why they're not lethal. But people who do get really well-preserved, well-made, well-transported genetic material, for them it probably is lethal. And there may be certain factors that allow them to take up more of it and make it more lethal to the human body. And clearly, there's predisposing factors, right? So someone with a blood clotting disorder, they're going to really be in trouble with this. Someone who has heart failure or heart disease are going to really, so those known entities. But so I think it's actually human error that's allowing people to survive with these vaccines. And that's the reason why the side effects and the deaths are related to lots. Remember the lot, a certain lot is more lethal than others because that's a good lot. It's not a bad lot, it's actually a good lot. It actually has everything that was designed in these. So in the spring of 2021, there was great concern. A French lab before us, and then this 57 author group started publishing papers and sending them to worldwide governments. And we said, listen, we're concerned. These things weren't properly tested. The spike protein we now know to be lethal. There's been no safety testing done. There was a concerning ovarian biodistribution study, reduced fertility reported in animals, no proper safety committees assembled for the worldwide programs. They were giving it to pregnant women, which is unheard of, and it's unheard of for a pregnant woman to accept this because of the fact that it wasn't tested in pregnant women and certainly had a dangerous mechanism of action. No risk stratification, no data transparency, and there was no assurances on long-term safety. To this day, everyone who's taken these, there's no way that we can know long-term that they're okay or not. Everything we've learned about these is bad. This paper came out from Stanford demonstrating that the messenger RNA is stuck in lymph nodes for a couple months. I mean, this was supposed to be in and out of the body in a couple days. And so this is as long as they've looked. It may be in the lymph nodes longer. We know it distorts the breast and the lymphatic system of women for a year in radiographic studies. But this is disturbing. You know, we don't have vaccines that stay in the human body for 60 days, certainly not genetic vaccines. Then this paper by senior author Yang D. Marinis demonstrating that at least the center part of the genetic code for Pfizer does install in human chromatin, meaning it reverse transcribes with an endogenous reverse transcriptase called line1. Now there's a race to try to replicate this elsewhere, but many experts believe since the center reporting region installs, that means probably the whole genetic code installs. If this is true, then we're really in trouble because 2/3 of the world has taken these, certainly those who took Pfizer. That means the human genome is forever altered, at least in a mosaic of cells. And if this has happened in spermatozoa and happened in eggs, it's going to pass on to the children. The genetic code for a lethal protein, a protein that causes disease. And the questions are, is it just immediately lethal to a cell when it expresses it, or does the cell manage it and create chronic diseases? What we're learning about spike protein is suggesting it's going to lead to chronic diseases because the body is trying to manage this within cells and within exosomes. So this is very disturbing. The messenger RNA in this recent paper has been described to actually be circulatory in blood for 15 days. That means it's in body secretions, it's in saliva, it's in urogenital secretions. People who take the vaccine are, in a sense, a walking vaccine, at least for a couple weeks. This has been demonstrated. This paper from Harvard shows the spike protein, which is the product of the genetic material, is circulatory. Again, it matches the prior paper by about 2 weeks, but somebody for about 29 days. No wonder people feel sick afterwards. No wonder this has been transmitted in breast milk to babies and the babies being harmed. No wonder this is a concern regarding conception and pregnancy. This is the longest acting type of vaccine we've ever seen in terms of its original test article in the body. This recent paper by Bruce Patterson at IncellDX is showing both the S1 and the S2 spike protein in human monocytes for at least several months. I interviewed Bruce for my show. He thinks it's probably for over a year in people with the vaccine. So once you take a vaccine, initially shot 1 and shot 2, immunocompromised, another month would be shot 3, and then routine shots every 6 months, there's no way the body can clear out this spike protein. It's going to start to accumulate everywhere, the brain, the heart, the tissues, and the spike protein causes disease. It's unequivocal. The FDA agrees it causes blood clots, it causes heart damage. There's a wealth of data suggesting now it's oncogenic, it causes cancer. So we're loading the human body with probably the most dangerous protein that could ever be devised and directed against a human population. We've had no safety review. You know, our CDC and FDA are running the program. They should have had monthly press briefings to American on safety. It's very rare that something doesn't need to be adjusted, dose or dose schedule. Every new drug doesn't come out just perfect. The idea that these are going to come out of the factory after 2 months and be perfect and we're never going to change them, we're never going to alter them, That should be disturbing to all of you. And it's because there's been an intentional, willful blindness to safety. The Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System clearly showed a problem in 2021. Side effects were going through the roof, and nobody in our governmental agencies was raising any alarm whatsoever. Here are the data from June 17th. When you go to OpenVAERS, by the way, toggle over to this US site. Otherwise, people are, when they're reporting these in lectures, they're reporting Japan and Germany. You always got to toggle over to the US, which is that right toggle button. 13,388 deaths. You can see 5,440 cases of myocarditis, 14,259 permanently disabled people. A paper by Meisner and colleagues showed that 86% of the time it's a doctor, a nurse, a paramedic, or another healthcare personnel who does these reports. They're all done under the threat of fines or imprisonment if we falsify these. And then they're assigned a temporary VAERS number, and the CDC verifies that these occur, and then they're given a permanent VAERS number. These are verified CDC events. And in the consent form, the CDC says, go to VAERS and review the safety. So in the end, the CDC is going to say, listen, we told you to go look at the safety. The CDC is going to listen, we were completely transparent with you. This was going on. It's in the consent form. People who sign the consent form are supposed to go here and review this and make a decision. Okay? These are astonishing numbers. On the right are the different vaccine injury syndromes. Most of them are cardiovascular. Now, I'm a cardiologist, and I can tell you, don't worry, I'm going for one of my zinc super lozenges. I have taken every single supplement that people have volunteered to me. I am so juiced. I'm juiced with nitric oxide, and I am just juiced with everything right now. But there's 1,000 papers on vaccine injuries. There's 1,000 papers, forget VAERS, 1,000 papers. Most of them are cardiovascular. Because the vaccines are so inflammatory, sure, they can trigger a conventional heart attack or a conventional stroke, but they also can cause direct brain damage and direct heart damage. Nick Pantazatos and Herb Seligman from Columbia estimate, using vaccine administration data and US Census data, they did a very good analysis. And by the way, this is in the ResearchGate server. Thank you, Avery. ResearchGate server. This is the same server that the NIH uses. They estimate now that we could have up to 187,000 Americans have died with these vaccines within a few days. And this was through December of 2021. This explains why all the life insurance companies are reporting record deaths off the Richter scale. Lincoln National this last month reported 63% excess mortality. We've never had employer-based life insurance companies report so many deaths. It's not due to COVID. The only new exposure out there is the COVID-19 vaccines. So the life insurance is, everything is cohesive. Everything is cohesive. When we see record numbers of athletes dying on the field, record numbers of life insurance claims, these types of estimates coming from the vaccine administration data, it's all cohesive. The vaccines are, on a more probable than not, and almost on a clear and convincing basis, causing death in people. It's tightly temporally related. Half the deaths within 48 hours, 80% within a week. We have causality assessment in this paper by McLachlan early on. 86% of the deaths have no other explanation. People go to a vaccine center and they die. Who's dying? Seniors. That's one of the hidden stories here, is the seniors. Those are the ones we wanted to protect the most with the vaccines, so they're dying at a much higher rate with the vaccines. Over 1,000 papers in the peer-reviewed literature now. We don't need VAERS. We don't need my opinion or your opinion. It's in the medical literature forever. And the papers continue to pour in, about 200 now, on myocarditis or heart inflammation. The science of medicine is carefully chronicling how dangerous these products are. The frustrating thing is the willful blindness to this at any type of governmental level, anywhere in the world, to pull these off the market. That's what people are getting so frustrated with. The myocarditis or heart inflammation, this is very solid. In June of 2021, the FDA says that the vaccines cause heart damage. It's the spike protein that damages pericytes. This is a very good paper from Italy demonstrating this. This recent autopsy paper from Bohmeyer and colleagues have demonstrated the spike protein is directly in the heart. It's in the heart. It's physically there. It's unequivocal the vaccines cause heart damage. And in this analysis by Tracy Hogue, 86.9% of young people are hospitalized. This is serious. It's putting people in the hospital. We don't know how many non-serious cases are going on. The kids don't know that they're receiving damage. Healthy boys have a higher chance of being hospitalized with the vaccine and heart damage than they do with COVID. This is terrible that our military would be forced to take something that's more likely to hospitalize a military soldier than the respiratory illness. And from Lloyd Austin on down, they're willfully blind to this. And I'm involved in over 100 cases as an expert, over a dozen cases right now as a plaintiff or as a defendant. And I can tell you these military people can't look me in the eye. And I tell them, listen, bring me Lloyd Austin. I want him right in front of me. He won't face me. He won't face me because the data here are so clear and obvious. The vaccines are weakening our military by two mechanisms. One, they're injuring the people who accept them, but they're also weakening the minds who accept them. Remember, only the strongest minds will say no to the vaccine, and the weaker minds give in. It's just like undergoing torture. When a soldier's captured, sooner or later, a weaker mind will give up. These soldiers who have the weaker minds are giving up and taking the vaccine. So by mental and physical means, the vaccines are clearly weakening our military. There's a report recently about 250,000 of the 2.7 million active duty people are ready to walk off. And it's sad, is that 250,000, they're actually our strongest leaders and our strongest fighters. And the weakest ones are staying behind. In a paper by Rose and myself, it showed it's 90% men, but it extends all the way out to the 60s and 70s. So almost every man in the room here is at risk for heart damage if they take a vaccine. This paper from Jenna Schauer, 2 of them show that 100% of them have MRI changes. They show damage to the heart and very subtle symptoms. This follow-up paper by Schauer shows very large amounts of heart damage. This one went from 26% to 19% by MRI. In general, if we have 15% of the myocardium that's damaged by an insult of any type, we have to put in an ICD. I can't imagine how many young people are going to have to get ICDs now. This is astonishing. The pilot that Josh Yoder showed you, he had to get an ICD. I can't tell you how many young people in my practice now have vaccine myocarditis, and now it's been over a year, and this is not going away. It's a nightmare. It's not mild, and it's not transitory, and it's not rare. And the CDC and FDA have said all 3 of those things. They're trying to minimize it. I'm a cardiologist. I'm telling you, we preserve every single last heart muscle tissue. Every single last. We put in stents, cholesterol lowering. We don't accept the tiniest fraction of heart damage. This idea that it's going to be normalized, oh, it's just mild, go ahead and take it. And then there's also been a false message that this is, it's less common than getting heart damage with the respiratory infection. So you should actually take heart damage with the vaccine. It's like, no, the majority of people have already had the respiratory infection. That risk is already gone. And it turns out in studies of people with the respiratory infection, there have been MRI studies like this, and they really couldn't find it. It was done in the NCAA, as well as a whole bunch of other, it was done in the military, they couldn't find it. So the respiratory infection, maybe in the ICU with a severe case, there can be some troponin elevation. But these are young people who should be fine. They should be going to school. They shouldn't be stuck in the hospital having MRIs. Fatal cases, 22-year-old man in Korea develops chest pain 5 days after the first dose of Pfizer. He comes to the hospital, he dies 7 hours later, and his heart is ravaged through the conduction system with inflammation. This is straight, this is not controversial. This is fatal myocarditis. The consent form should have been changed a year ago and saying you can lose your life with COVID-19 vaccination. The schools should be widely disseminating this information to parents, saying there are young people dying of myocarditis. The schools are willfully blind to the deaths of people that will happen with myocarditis. 2 boys in Connecticut on days 3 and 4 after Pfizer were found at home by their parents dead. Parents are outraged. They asked for autopsies. They underwent autopsies with the Connecticut coroner. This was backed up by the University of Michigan and University of Minnesota pathology departments, published in the best pathology journal. It's clear the vaccines cause their death. The vaccines cause heart death. It's inflammation, and it leads to a sudden cardiac arrest or asystole. Many die in their bed, by the way. Many of them, it's a painless death. They don't even get a chance to ask for CPR. And you turn on the news any day, like today, a famous Russian soccer player just died, and a daughter of one of the Illinois representatives in Congress just died. Any day now, it's just all you hear is about death, 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 and almost all of it is probably related to myocarditis or blood clots. Those are the two major mechanisms. Now, in the unvaccinated here, you can see compared to background, there's a tiny, tiny, tiny set of rates of myocarditis, and it's no different than the background rate. It's possible to get myocarditis from parvovirus or giant cell. But this paper is a good one to basically eliminate the false narrative that people are getting myocarditis with a respiratory infection. It's not happening. That's a false narrative to say, oh, large numbers of people are getting it with the respiratory infection, so you should take the vaccine and get it with the vaccine. That's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. So without protection from the pharmaceutical laws, and we have laws that are being broken right now, they're going to do more harm. So there's a public health professional and transparency committee. There's a lawsuit, one of the ones I'm involved with. Lead attorney Aaron Seary, co-counsel Elizabeth Brem. They said, listen, if we're going to be forced to take these vaccines, they wanted Pfizer, the lead manufacturer, to tell us what did they know about the vaccines. What did Pfizer know about the vaccines? This is what transpired. This is stunning. Within 90 days of Pfizer being released, 1,223 deaths and 1,291 adverse events of interest were reported. The FDA, not Pfizer, the FDA attempted to block the release of these documents in court to the public for 55 years. The FDA, I am telling you, it's in the open. The FDA is involved in an active cover-up of large numbers of deaths that are occurring with COVID-19 vaccines. Use the word cover up. The FDA is involved. This will come to justice. The FDA has the responsibility to safeguard American public from unsafe products. Pfizer had a duty as a manufacturer. Pfizer should have shut it down after 50, should have started calling in. Something went bad. Either the vials went bad, something happened. But instead, Pfizer's been willfully blind. The FDA's been willfully blind. Pfizer actually hired 600 people just to take all the reports of people dying after their vaccine. People have asked me, have I taken the vaccine? Taking a vaccine right now is tantamount to playing Russian roulette with suicide. It really is. It depends on how much you value your life. And a lot of people are being pitted with keeping their job or losing their life. That's the reason why there's so much tension. Now, fortunately, there's a ton of jobs available because there's so many people dying and vacating their jobs. So everyone's saying, I'm going to lose my job. I said, well, get a better one because there's so many jobs open. It's not funny, but the population is being thinned quickly, and it's really being driven at the top. Now, we've had two presidents say this. Say, listen, just do it. It's patriotic. Just do it. If you lose your life, tough beans, but just do it. That's kind of the attitude. Never have we had President, FDA, NIH, CDC, all ask Americans to potentially lose their lives after taking an experimental injection. Never. The vaccines are not safe on either side of the Atlantic. There was a press briefing out of Bath, UK, just about a month ago. A pharmacovigilance report by the World Council for Health. This is a good website to follow. It represents 70 non-governmental organizations nationwide. You can see the report here. Pull them off the market. They're not safe. They're not safe. This is a worldwide body. I testified, some of you saw this last night in the Texas Senate. I said, listen, pay attention to this. When a worldwide body says pull them off the market, they're not fooling around. It's like you continue to give them in Walgreens and CVS like they're safe. No, they are basically clear cut. This is a 20-page report. They're clearly not safe. Now, what about efficacy? Have the vaccines provided any good with all this unacceptable safety data? Well, the virus quickly mutated. The products have not been updated. and the efficacy has been lost. The vaccines only work for 6 months, so now boosters are needed. And the valid studies versus placebo or control have not demonstrated sterilization of virus in the nose, block transmission, or reductions in hospitalizations and death. None of those things have been shown. None of them. So the only thing that's gone on is this consolation prize. Well, the vaccines really don't work. We have to give everybody 6 months, but you won't end up in the hospital if you take a vaccine. None of the randomized trials had hospitalization death as a primary endpoint, so no one can make that claim. The FDA doesn't make that claim. Read the consent form. The consent form doesn't say that. It's a false talking point. It's a piece of propaganda. Those who take the vaccine are more likely to seek early treatment. Early treatment is what keeps people out of the hospital, not the vaccine, right? When someone goes to the hospital, the unvaccinated is more likely to get excessively tested than the vaccinated, and they count all hospitalizations the same. If you show up for an ankle sprain, what have you, is counted the same. Once you test positive and have real COVID, you're intermittently positive for about 6 to 9 months. So most of the, quote, hospitalization cases right now are not pulmonary COVID. They're just people testing positive from their prior infection. I checked at our major medical center the other day. I said, how many real cases of pulmonary COVID do we have in the critical care unit? None. There was one guy on ECMO, but it was because of a motor vehicle accident. He's concomitantly testing positive. So don't be swayed by this idea that the hospitals are overflowing with cases right now. There's always been a contamination of the hospitalization data because they're not adjudicated for who really has pulmonary COVID. In addition, most hospital electronic medical records like ours, like Epic, their default is unvaccinated. So unless somebody really proves their vaccine status and they can get somebody to check that box over, everyone in the hospital is counted as unvaccinated. That's what created this false talking point of crisis of the unvaccinated. That was actually never true. That was just because the electronic record keeps them unvaccinated. That's the reason why they were able to say that 99% unvaccinated. It's because 99%, the electronic record was never switched over. You have to actually try to prove it when you're sick on oxygen, trying to get the nurse and prove that you're vaccinated. The thing is an entire sham. Even when this crisis on the unvaccinated talking point came out, the CDC was reporting early in 2021, at least a third of people in the hospital were fully vaccinated. So we've never had a crisis of the unvaccinated. So the problem is we fool with Mother Nature. If we just would have not had the vaccines, the virus could have been managed. But now we've put this evolutionary pressure on the virus. And the Delta variant, for instance, was clearly a product of excessive vaccination. In this paper, it was demonstrated 39% of the transmission was fully vaccinated to fully vaccinated. When the CDC came out and told America that the vaccines don't block transmission, there should have never been any mandates. The only reason why an employer would mandate it is if it could actually improve the safety of the workplace. Because they don't block transmission, that means a fully vaccinated workforce or a fully vaccinated cruise boat or a fully vaccinated concert, they could spread COVID to each other. In fact, it happened. So any entity that's mandating the vaccine is doing it for some reason that's not in alignment with the original emerging data. Omicron broke through natural immunity. That was a frustrating thing. Natural immunity was holding out as being great in terms of protection against, ever having the disease again. But Omicron broke through natural and vaccine immunity. So most people have had it 2 or 3 times now because one can get an Omicron infection. Omicron is the most highly mutated lower left corner form of the virus, so it has opportunities for subvariants. We're currently in the BA.5 wave. But our CDC told us early with Omicron, Omicron's victims were the fully vaccinated. 79% of Omicron cases, by CDC, this is their journal, 79% of Omicron is fully vaccinated. So as an unvaccinated person, you can't be blamed for anything. It's the fully vaccinated that are contracting the illness. Here's the most recent Nowcast data, and this is a very good, not everything the CDC is doing is bad. This is a very good report. You can see in green here that we're highest with the BA.5 subvariant. You can see the different waves, the original wild type, the alpha, delta, and the Omicron wave. We are having a secondary wave of Omicron, but so many people have had the illness now that even though the R0 value or the spread value, with the original one, it was 1 to 3. Now it's 1 to 18. But there's not 18 susceptible people sitting around somebody with COVID. Most people have had it. So it's not going to spread that far. But you'll get a lot of calls. I talked to Dr. Newberger, Brownstein, and others. We're getting calls to manage it. Last night I got a few more patients and managing it pretty easily. But here are the data. The vaccines do not sterilize the nasopharynx. Somebody coming forward for testing is equally likely to be loaded with the virus as somebody who has not had a vaccine. They're equally as infectious. The vaccinated are equally a threat to someone else. Recently, former President Obama got COVID after 3 or 4 shots. When he recovered, he gave a speech to Stanford graduation, and he basically said that the unvaccinated are selfish and they're putting their families at risk. He himself just put his family at risk. He's fully vaccinated. These data suggest the fully vaccinated are just as much as a risk as unvaccinated. You can see how this pejorative, divisive, prejudicial types of statements are coming out even from people of color, and it's actually now about this false illusion that the vaccine provides some type of safety when the data indicates it doesn't. How about 3rd and 4th doses? This paper by Amit and colleagues show vaccine efficacy is highlighted in yellow, way less than 50% for Pfizer or Moderna. Now the good news is, look at the bottom line here with Omicron, nobody being hospitalized. Nobody being hospitalized for COVID. That's the point. With Omicron, there's really little, if any, respiratory involvement. And there still is a tremendous Twitter feed out there. Oh, COVID is bad, get masked up, take shots. I'll tell you, the data says New England Journal of Medicine, people are not being hospitalized with Omicron. It is an outpatient cold, basically. Now, in the Scottish system, people who are being hospitalized, now it's a small number of hospitalizations, it doesn't look so good for the vaccinated people. It can happen in large data, hospitalizations and deaths, and this happens all over the world. And it has to do with something called immune imprinting. Once there's 3 or 4 shots, the body is being trained to recognize the extinct spike protein. So the immune system is being trained on the wrong target, and then when you get the real thing, some frail people can actually get a severe syndrome that lands them in the hospital. But anywhere where they're keeping fair vaccine status, far more people in the hospital, when they are there due to, they're fully vaccinated as opposed to unvaccinated. 3 papers, Beatty, Kampf, and Subramanian, Beatty from Canada, demonstrate 89% of the countries who mass vaccinate the populations are actually having more deaths than cases. Vaccination is backfiring. It's backfiring. If we never would have vaccinated, these papers suggest we would have been better off. So we've always needed a balanced approach, and sadly, I volunteered for the White House Task Force twice, and I never even received an email back. But I can tell you, I published this, that we should have had a team of doctors trying to reduce the spread of the virus. The most important way to reduce the spread of the virus is the nasal washes. It's not a hand infection. The hand sanitizer doesn't work, right? The masks, the virus goes around, the mask's easy. It's actually nasal sprays that actually would be the contagion control method. We always needed early home treatment, and we need to do better in the hospital. Don't you find it odd that no single hospital claims to be a center of excellence for COVID? They all want to be best in heart disease, they want to be best in cancer. Hospitals are getting paid premiums for these admissions. You think the hospitals would be competing for COVID patients? You think you have billboards saying, have COVID and getting sick, ship them to Henry Ford or Beaumont? How come none of the hospitals claim to have any expertise in COVID? Where's the Mayo Clinic protocol? Where's the Duke protocol? Right, so the NIH and IDSA have protocols, but that's kind of a base minimum. We should be doing things above that. I just find it, we're 3 years into it and not a single hospital claims to be cutting edge or claims to be any good at taking care of COVID. Stunning. It's stunning. When I told Tucker Carlson like that, I said, do you know Mayo, the Mayo Clinic, doesn't have the Mayo protocol to take care of COVID? He goes, you're kidding me. I said, no, they've completely drawn a blank on this illness. They're great at everything else, but they've drawn a blank on COVID. But by the way, on TV, do you ever see any of these doctors who are working on inpatient COVID units on TV with me or Jay Bhattacharya or Scott Ellis? Never. These guys have no pride in what they're doing whatsoever. They're not on TV. They're not providing any commentary. They can't say, well, at Mayo Clinic, we've got mortality down to 0 because we're doing the Mayo method. Nothing. It's just so interesting. So hospital care is terrible. And let me just go back for a second. Oh, I can't. Oh, yeah, I can. I just want to make the point that, and lastly, a vaccine program. Should we have a vaccine program? I think a vaccine program based on a nasal mist that could have been administered, let's say some type of antigen-based vaccine, a nasal mist that could have been administered to nursing home patients and direct healthcare workers and nursing workers, maybe about 2.7 million people, 3 million people. That would have been fine. Not a genetic shot in the arm. That was never okay. But some type of nasal mist. Hamid Merchant from the UK, I've done some things with him. He's very pro-vaccine. He's like, listen, it's just a mistake to try to give a genetic shot in the arm to stop a sinus infection. We needed a nasal mist. I wouldn't be against it if it would have been a far better conceived approach. But whether or not someone's vaccinated, they need early treatment. Here are the 2 seminal papers that laid this out. The principles are, listen, we started from nothing. We know the drugs aren't perfect. We're going to use this in a high-risk patient population where this is a potential mass casualty. We needed a signal of benefit from all available evidence, randomized and non-randomized data, acceptable safety, and use drugs in combination. We know this is a serious infection. Even a serious staph infection, we don't use one drug. So this idea of, oh, just use this drug, it's a miracle drug. No, we don't even use a single drug in shingles, for crying out loud. We always use drugs in combination. So, those of us working, and most of the doctors here, we are basically the front line. The hospital's not the front line, they're the last line. The front line has been the people out there who've been really facing these patients head on. We know we had to work with drug combinations because there's viral proliferation, cytokine injury, and thrombosis and blood clotting, at least with the original versions of the virus. And then we had about 2 weeks to work in order to kind of get organized and have drugs that antagonize these stages, antivirals, anti-inflammatories, and anticoagulants. This is sequenced multi-drug treatment, and largely it's people over age 50 where the risks get to be higher or present with severe symptoms. We go through this algorithm. I won't belabor all of it, but it's advanced over time because we have new drugs. I was on ABC TV, and someone asked me, Dr. McCullough, are you one of these doctors who yells at the ER about or would you be upset if the ER doesn't give ivermectin or something like this? I said, listen, the first year of the pandemic, we relied on hydroxychloroquine as one of 4 to 6 drugs. Not necessary, not sufficient, but we used it. Second year of the pandemic, we used ivermectin. I said the third year of the pandemic, we're using Paxlovid, and to some degree molnupiravir. I said, but what's not okay is for a patient to go to the ER and get nothing and get sent home. That's what's not okay. It turns out any combination of 4 to 6 drugs work. There are non-hydroxy, non-ivermectin protocols in South America and South Africa that work. You just have to use different drugs. And it just turns out what doctors have found out, I think particularly with Omicron, the most dynamic combination is actually ivermectin at 600 micrograms per kilogram plus prednisone. I think that really is the dynamic. And I've managed hundreds and hundreds. I haven't managed as many as Dr. Newberger and others, but I've managed enough to understand that these drugs work and how to work with them in combinations. And you saw last night my testimony in the Texas Senate. I said 1 doctor taking care of COVID in the community. That is the community standard of care. 1 doctor, 1 nurse practitioner. That's it. It's very important. The medical board, the NIH, the CDC, they do not establish community standards of care. Doctors and healthcare providers do. 1 doctor who attempts to treat COVID has established a community standard of care, period. Period. This idea that somehow the medical board can start to contort things on a doctor because they're using ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine, that is a violation of law. There's actually law that relates to clinical practice and malpractice that says what, and I wanted to make sure that got read into the Texas Senate because doctors in Texas are being hunted. The high prescribers of ivermectin are being hunted. The medical board is trying to attack doctors' community standard of care. That's out of bounds. They can't do it. The medical board can't tell a neurosurgeon on what approach they should take to the spine. They can't do that. They're out of their lane. One of the most important things I've learned is nasal washes. One of the presenters said today, or actually last night, Dr. Brownstein said this, that no virus can live in iodine. Iodine kills the virus. The Omicron's replicating 70 times faster than Delta up in the nose. You got to squirt dilute povidone iodine up in the nose, sniff it back and spit it out. You got to choke on it. That's a good nasal wash. Do it twice on each side, gargle with the rest. It's a little bit noisy. Do it by yourself in the bathroom. But I'm telling you right now, and my wife will tell you, that's what I've been working on and it works for all different colds. It's great. It can take an average cold down to about 2 days. It would have been 2 weeks. I mean, it's really amazing. So how do you do it? Half a teaspoon of povidone iodine in 1.5 ounces of water, a shot glass, a pinch of salt, and that's your homemade solution. Now there's brand names out there, Cofix RX, xylitol works, there's Clear outside, hydrogen peroxide works, 3/4 of a teaspoon in 1.5 ounces of water, a pinch of salt. So there are many different ways. Colloidal silver works, nitric oxide works. The virus is easily killed, just like it's easily killed with hand sanitizers. The problem is it's not on the hands, it's in the nasal passages. You have to kill it in nasal passages. This is a critical paper, randomized prospective controlled trial. It's one of the best studies. And here you can see PCR positive patients sick with COVID. They turn PCR negative by day 3 in the vast majority. It's amazing. This cuts down spread of the infection better than anything. Have your patients start this at home. That way don't spread it to everybody else. If people do nothing for their nose, they're going to cough and sneeze and get everybody else infected. This is the best strategy to reduce spread of the virus. Now in the clinical trial, it also reduces need for oxygenation, hospitalization dramatically without other drugs. So I have patients start nasal washes immediately. In active treatment, we do it 4 times a day. For prevention, 1 or 2 times a day. Congresswoman, she wants to know, why is the federal government not promoting nasal sprays? Look at 12 clinical studies, randomized trials, very supportive. Do you know the nasal spray companies actually received threatening letters from the FDA and the Federal Trade Commission to not promote their products? Yes. One of the companies is out here today. We actually updated a chapter in our book on this. This is so egregious. Anything that could possibly help people, our government has suppressed. Our government. Not the vaccine companies, our government. This is starting to sound like a government operation. Honestly, it really is. The FDA says we should be using drugs off of their original advertising label when we're fulfilling an unmet need. People say, Dr. McCullough, you're using hydroxychloroquine off label. Well, yeah, I'm supposed to. I'm fulfilling an unmet need, just like ivermectin. The original advertising label has nothing to do with its future use. We use prednisone off-label, dexamethasone off-label. We use enoxaparin off-label. It's all off-label use, and it's appropriate off-label use. That's what we're doing. This is in the Home Treatment Guide. This came out October of 2020 after our first paper in the American Journal of Medicine. I was so proud of this, that we got a home treatment guide out to Americans with telemedicine services linked. It's been the most downloaded, utilized document in all of COVID-19. It blows away anything our federal government has done for our patients. Treat the viral infection and handle the pandemic. Early protocols. This is the Brian Proctor data from Texas. Early protocols reduced hospitalization and death by about 85%. Early protocols. That's before we had everything figured out. I've testified under oath now. Modern day practice, in my hands or any of the capable doctors or nurses here, 95% reductions in hospitalizations, that even the most severe patients, nursing home patients. Recently, somebody in my family in a nursing home got COVID. And so I had a chance to talk to the nursing home doctor. He goes, yeah, I'm treating it. He was kind of merrily moving around. He actually goes in the room and just with a mask and examines patients. No hazmat suit or anything else. I said, have you had anybody go to the hospital? He goes, never. Never. By the way, you don't hear about nursing homes emptying out, going to the hospital right now, do you? No, don't hear about it. It's because the treatment works. Now, I put 3 landmarks where I testified in the U.S. Senate, Texas Senate, and back to the U.S. Senate at those landmarks because, under oath, I'm giving my best estimation of what's going on. And when I back calculate, I think we could have saved 69% of the lives that were lost with early treatment. 69%. Going forward, it's 95%. And most people actually know about early treatment now. Most people are getting early treatment. Natural immunity, how many people have had the illness at least once? Just about everybody. So this is really important. Our CDC said through October of last year, and the CDC, by the way, has not updated this. I checked this on the way here. They said half of Americans had already had it by the fall. Yet vaccination has occurred now in a large fraction of Americans. 82% of Americans have taken a vaccine. So we have double or triple covered people with this illness. I was shocked with this data here. This just came off the CDC last night. Look at the unvaccinated, non-Hispanic white, 2% over age 65. Age 50 to 64, that's me, 11%. There's 11% of people like me. Well, I'm not taking one of these vaccines. I already had COVID in 2020. I'm fit and strong. I can go run 5 miles. I'm not taking a vaccine. Yeah. And people say, well, Dr. McCullough, it's going to be mandated to take a vaccine. I said, anybody who wants to mandate a vaccine, I want them in front of me right now and explain to me. Nobody has the courage to show up. When we testified in the U.S. Senate on January 24th, we invited the NIH, CDC, FDA, president, vice president. No one showed up. No one showed up. We're going back to Washington August 3rd, and we're inviting the American Board of Internal Medicine and all the boards. I bet no one will show up. Most people who have vaccine mandates at work, they don't even know who the responsible person was who made the decision on a vaccine mandate. It's this anonymous initiative. The issue here, though, is the vast majority of people have taken vaccines. And it's obvious the problem hasn't gone away. It's not a problem of vaccine hesitancy. It's not a problem of vaccine compliance. Here are the injections given, current boosters. About 25% of the country is currently actively boosted. And I think most people have given up on it. The recent New York Times piece said 35% of the population is not taking a vaccine or not taking a booster. That means a lot of people took it initially and now they realized they don't work or they're not safe. Scott Atlas, who's in my group at Fox News, I said, listen, it's unprecedented that we don't account for natural immunity. If you had mumps, you wouldn't just take the mumps vaccine. It doesn't work that way. If you already had the illness, you're done. You're automatically exempted once you've already had the illness. That's true for any illness. Now, this paper just came from Qatar in the preprint server system. Very, very important. If one's had the illness once, which is most of you, you have a 97.3% protection from ever having severe COVID, ever again. Your natural immunity and that's well over a year. It's like 14, 17 months of data. Natural immunity blows away these vaccines. It's not even close. And listen, it's over with. And it doesn't appear to wane. It's not statistically wane. Can you get COVID a second time? Yes. Is it going to be like a common cold? Yes. And we're just going to get on with it. It's endemic now. It's not going away. I honestly don't think there's much a need for testing. People said, I've already had COVID. Do I need to get another test? I said, no, it's like a cold. Okay. The reason why we're here is our freedom is at risk, that somehow the vaccines and the fervor for the vaccines got so whooped up that people basically started to think that, my gosh, I couldn't get on a train, I couldn't get on a plane. And it's true in some countries, that's true, that somehow our freedom was linked. And so we've seen this linkage, and this is what I said in my Lincoln Memorial address, that medical freedom is linked to social and economic freedom. And as soon as you have your medical freedom broken, as soon as you have a pill that's shoved down your throat or a needle that's put in your arm against your will, you're broken. It's like that soldier. You're broken. You might as well get on your knees and take it. That is a broken man or woman. Broken. And once your medical freedom is broken, you're broken. Your social freedom is broken. And your economic freedom that means your economic freedom is tethered to taking one of these every 6 months, right? That means your job is tethered to taking one. Because you know what the claim is? The claim is, hey, you took it once, you can take it again, right? Right, you took it once, you took it, okay. Every single person I know who has been damaged by these vaccines, heart damage, a blood clot, a stroke, transverse myelitis in a wheelchair, and I've got them all in my clinic. Every single one of them says, I regret these vaccines, I'm never going to take another one again. I said, where was that resolve to begin with? Oh, I wanted to keep my job. I said, why don't you get a better job? I mean, especially these pharmaceutical reps, they really crack me up. They change jobs every 6 months or whatever. Anyway, I go, I've known you for 10 years. You've had 6 different companies. Suddenly you don't want to change jobs? Get another job. I mean, this is obvious right now. If your job is making you feel uncomfortable, get a better job. That's what it means. If people actually are willing to move and change jobs, the employers will figure this out pretty quickly. Censorship and scientific discourse. Ron Johnson's an American hero. He's really stood up for us. The censorship started to happen in the medical literature. It's at Medicine Grants rounds now. It's in Medscape, all the different email chains. There is a propaganda campaign going on to railroad mass vaccination on the planet. And anybody who says anything that could lead somebody to not taking a vaccine is censored, or injured, or losing their jobs, or having their boards threatened. It's pretty obvious, right, that the powers that be want a needle in every arm every 6 months forever. Forever. Australia bought 7 years' worth. Canada bought 5 years' worth. So whatever is planned, it's a long-term plan of getting genetic shots or getting spike protein exposure every 6 months forever. There's never any information like, listen, it's over with in 6 months, or it's going to be over with. There's never any endpoint here. Okay. It looks to me, based on the original publications from UNC Chapel Hill, what came out of Wuhan, China, how the vaccine was being developed concurrently with the virus, with the planning events. In Peter Bregin's book, COVID-19 and the Global Predators, there's 36 coronavirus pandemic preparedness meetings, 36. 25 of them generated documents you can look at, and 6 of them were face-to-face meetings. So our current White House coordinator for COVID, the guy who went up against me in the US Senate, he was at the planning meeting in 2019 where they're planning for this. So was Gates Foundation, so was the Chinese CDC. They were at the planning meeting. It's gonna happen. Okay, it's all there. This is all in the open. The threat and the vaccine. And by the way, there's a concurrent development of smallpox, monkeypox. The threat and the vaccine, they're being developed together. Aspergillus spores, the threat and the response. That's BARDA and DARPA. This appears to be a US operation, is what I'm telling you. And that's the reason why there is such wonderful control through the medical systems, through the medical boards, through you can imagine the Chinese or Pfizer, Moderna, they couldn't have the power that the US government does through what's called emergency countermeasures. As long as an emergency is declared, then countermeasures, which is wide open, FBI, CDC, entire intelligence committee, military, you name it, can all be operationalized to achieve the objective. The objective is a needle in every arm, in every person, for the foreseeable future, every 6 months, down to a 6-month-old baby. That's the reason why the vaccines were approved, even when the vaccines obviously failed in children, they were approved anyway. It doesn't matter, the clinical trials don't matter anymore. The objective is for people to take these shots. What's going on, and for those people who are continuing to take them, about a third of people are in this. They're in what's called mass formations, likely. Now, I know this has been presented already, but they're in a form of a psychological operation where they now really believe in this, no matter what. If they take 3 of these and they get COVID and they come in the hospital, they come out, they'll take more shots. And some people actually take extra shots. They go to the pharmacy and they get a couple extra shots. They're in the formation now. And Matthias Desmet, who's written on this great book, Psychology of Totalitarianism, I've read it, says that we just have to do what we're doing now, constant, non-confrontational messaging. Everybody needs to have a conversation. Most doctors, by the way, are in the formation. And this is where you can help. You can help. I think everybody here should schedule a visit with their doctor. And when you go to your doctor, what you ought to do is go through the whole exam. If the doctor doesn't bring it up, you should ask at the end, "Doctor, should I take a COVID vaccine?" And the doctor says, "Well, sure you should." Say, "Well, you know, thanks, but I don't think they're safe enough for me." For me. "Oh, yeah, they're safe. Well, not for me." And just let the doctor stew on that. It may be safe enough for him who keeps taking them, but not for you. So create that differential. Create that differential. It's really important. The worst thing you can do is don't say anything and run for the hills. That's not helping. And what's not helping is you trying to convince the doctor, "Here's the report, doctor. Here's the information, and they're not safe. I can prove it to you. I'm a smarter patient." That's not working either. The best thing to do is just personalize it. So, you know, for me, it's not safe for me. No, I've seen too many reports of blood clots, thousands of them, thousands of deaths, thousands of heart damage. No, it's not safe enough for me. You can use the word thousands because that's pretty clear. Okay, thousands. It's a big number. So, and then let the doctor stew on it. Doctor after doctor needs to hear from patients that the patients don't think the vaccines are safe. I'm a cardiologist. I check cholesterol levels. Do you know how many patients tell me they don't think statins are safe for them? Patients have no problem saying they're concerned about statins. But yet a single patient doesn't have the courage to tell their doctor that they don't think the vaccines are safe for them. Vast majority of people I talk to, I said, "Did you actually say that to your doctor?" "Oh, no, I was scared. I had to get out of it. I want to see you." No. If patients confront their doctors, they can start to bring them out of this. See, what happened with the vaccine program is when it rolled out, they didn't go to the nursing homes. The very first place they went was the hospitals and the clinics. They got the doctors first. And it was incessant. "Here, doctor, take a vaccine. I'm like, "I already had COVID. It's too late for a vaccine." "Oh, you need to take one anyway." I said, "Why? I've already had it. I'm not taking it." So I'm one out of a trillion doctors in my health system that didn't take the vaccine. But they got the doctors early. And what happens is when people take the vaccine, they actually now know there's risks. Everyone knows there's risks. What they do is they figure, "Listen, I took it. I took the risk. You need to too." Yeah, that's the feeling. I took the risk. I took the risk to protect others. You need to do it too. So that's the psychology here. But for you to say, "Listen, I already had it 3 times, and I don't think they're safe." If you've already taken a couple shots, you can say, "Listen, I took a couple shots. They didn't work, doctor. I got it anyway, and now we've learned they're not safe. Thousands of people are dying. I don't think I should take it." Doctors need to hear you. You need to do that. It's so important for your doctor to hear that. The patient-doctor interchange is really important. Okay. Here's Psychology of Totalitarianism. That's now in English. United States Affair with Mark McDonald. Both real. There's not that many COVID books out there. You've really got to dig in on these. The Matthias Desmet book you can read on a plane trip. It's very easy. The media, we're breaking through. You know, I set all records on Joe Rogan. I recently had somebody comment, and they said, "Gosh, you beat Elon Musk." And I said, "Well, listen, he may have more money, but I'm more interesting." But look at what we talked about here. The biggest topic point was monoclonal antibodies. And this interview actually was labeled as misinformation all the way up to President Biden. So when I messaged Jen Psaki, I said, "What do you want to talk about? Which monoclonal antibody do you want to talk about?" "Listen, I use them all the time. They're safe and effective. They're Operation Warp Speed." By the way, there's a recent paper on my Twitter feed by Huang and colleagues, just came out today in JAMA. Do you know monoclonal antibodies were so safe and effective that patients who got them in the ER who were really, really sick, they were spared death and mechanical ventilation? And the sad thing is only 17% of people were offered monoclonal antibodies in the ER. The vast majority were railroaded into the hospital and given remdesivir. So to this day, monoclonal antibodies, when you can get them for really sick elderly people, are safe and effective. But you can see the things we talked about. So the response back from the White House is, oh, no, Dr. McCullough, it wasn't you. It was really that Rogan made some racial statements so many years ago. They quickly got on Rogan. Rogan probably never talked to me again because it nearly lost his whole Spotify contract. But fortunately, this was a breakthrough interview. This, and I've had Tucker Carlson. I've gone on Daystar 3 times. Daystar is bigger, by the way. Rogan, I think I hit nearly. We hit in the end with all the rumbles and repeats and stuff. We hit about half the nation, about 160 million, with Rogan. And it was 40,000 direct downloads within a few weeks, and it exploded. But when I go on Daystar, which is the largest Christian broadcasting network, and it's out of Dallas, they have 200 million paid subscribers worldwide, 145 countries. They estimate about 3 people watch it per show, so that's 600 million per view, and then when they run reruns. So that's 1.7 billion people. Even our President of the United States doesn't have that reach. So we really do. We really do. Our voice, by the way, is so much louder than the other side just because of our press abilities. Look at this. This is what I spoke on the Lincoln Memorial, and I was freezing cold, and I can tell you a couple of times I just paused and I listened to see if for any counter protest. Does someone say, no, these vaccines are good, you should take them? Nobody said that. I can tell you right now, I checked with the front desk, there's no Pfizer rally on the other side of town today. There's no Moderna gala event. None. Nobody wants these vaccines. Nobody wants them. They're a menace. They are a dark menace. And I've been on Laura Ingraham. I told Laura, I said, the day they pull off the market, it'll be a national holiday. the day they pull these off the market, I'm going on vacation for a month when they pull these off the market because they are a menace. They are a dark menace. Every day people wake up and they don't want to face these. People in our military are so downtrodden and so depressed and so defeated. They want these vaccines out of their lives. Getting COVID right now is no big deal. I don't have anybody walking around saying, Dr. McCullough, I'm scared to death of COVID. They're scared to death of these vaccines. We have it all in the record, by the way. I've done everything I possibly can. Christina Parks is here with us. Christina was there. She was wonderful. We were in the Kennedy caucus room. We're going to go back again. We're doing everything we can. I got to tell you, we're doing everything we can. But we need your voice. And your voice, we need your one-on-one with the doctor. We need you to talk. Keep spreading these circles. What we're doing, we can. The book, everybody, try to get a copy of the book. These are, I think, the 2 best. I've contributed to both. But Courage to Face COVID-19. John Leake is a best-selling author. He's from Dallas, but he lived in Vienna for a long time. It's a fast read. It's written as a story. It's a story about the development of early treatment and how many of the hero doctors, we ran into trouble when it seemed to be a government operation trying to suppress our treatment of patients. We added a chapter on how CEOs of nasal spray companies were attacked. I mean, you just can't believe. There was an intentional suppression of early treatment to promote fear, suffering, hospitalization, and death. And it was intentional. It was intentional in order to prepare the population to accept mass vaccination. It's clear. I told Tucker Carlson that. He started getting so worked up. He goes, who's doing this? I said, Tucker, I'm just a doctor. I'm just reporting the news. Somebody's going to have to figure this out. But something is going on that's very bad right now. We have hundreds of citations. This is nonfiction. This is a fast-reading story. Peter Bregan's book is the encyclopedic timeline, the timeline of how the virus was devised, how the research was done with the vaccines concomitantly with the virus, how this was all planned. There's a timeline, and he's got 1,100 references, and they are pinpoint. There are papers stating that SARS-CoV-2 is a bioweapon. It actually meets the definition in the published literature. There's 3 papers cited on this. 3 papers. This is what's going on. The 2 threats were the infection and now the vaccine. It's like a double hit, basically. And everybody appears to have taken a hit almost with one or the other or both. So these books are complementary. The one on the right, Courage to Face COVID-19, we have here. It's cash only. My wife is manning the booth, but it'd be wonderful to kind of sell them all so we can have a light suitcase on the way home. And And thank you so much. People say, how can you support it? So you can support the effort more with a book because A, book can't be censored, and B, it can be a good Christmas present to kind of open people's minds. It's considered a gateway book, that people's minds will be open because it's not an anti-vaccine book. It's basically leading people up to what is going on. So to finish and conclude, this pandemic has been a disaster. It's blown up our lives. Its pathophysiology is complex. We have to treat it early. Early ambulatory therapy is the only hope of reducing the serious risks. The genetic vaccines have an unfavorable safety profile. Protection is not sufficiently complete or durable. Censorship or reprisal are working to crush the lifeblood of science. If we can't meet and talk about things, we're not going to have scientific advancements. We're like a lion. We're roaring right now. We've kind of weighed out the judgment. Remember, the truth is like a lion. St. Augustine said this. Let the lion out. It can defend itself. That's the reason why no one will face it. That's the reason why Lloyd Austin is not going to be in front of me or any one of these people you can see. They don't have the courage, right? Because it's truth. What we're really talking about is truth. Here's the call to action. Drop all mandates immediately. Got to go. Every conversation, drop mandates. This week, I met with the Attorney General in Virginia. I'm invited to a lot of secret meetings now. But Attorney General, he said, well, what's the talking point? I said, drop them. Drop them. They're illegal. They're immoral. They're unethical. Drop them. 2, prohibit any forms of pressure, coercion, or threat of reprisal. Ban all forms of vaccine discrimination. You know, Tedros WHO was on a video recently saying they want to hunt down the unvaccinated. A, there's not that many people to hunt, but that's obviously a form of discrimination. We need to pause these vaccines, take them off the market. Novavax has received EUA approval, but the CDC, they've been slow walking that vaccine. I'm not against vaccines. If Novavax, which I think has been far more fair in its briefing booklet, where it does indicate some heart damage and indicate blood clots, but they've been far more fair with that product. If they want to offer that product as a booster for high-risk pulmonary patients or nursing home patients under some limited program, I'm not against it. But the genetic vaccines, I think absolutely positively have to go. We should begin vaccine injury treatment centers at major medical centers. Most doctors are not even recognizing these vaccine injuries. All these deaths that are being reported. We need to know, did they take the vaccine, yes or no, and when did they take it? Right now, all the deaths, there's no outrage. There's just some type of flowery eulogy saying, oh, that we need to enjoy our time together while we have it. So wait a minute, 17-year-old girl just died. What do you mean? Normally, she had a long battle with cancer, she had heart and lung disease, cystic fibrosis, or she died of a car accident or suicide. It wasn't that she just died in her sleep. So what Kasten wrote about his daughter, you can tell that there's no outrage, something is wrong. This started, by the way, with Hank Aaron. Hank Aaron took one of these, he was dead within a few days. Nobody's recognized it, and we have to force our doctors to recognize it. Report things to VAERS. Report things to the Truth for Health Foundation, vaccine injuries, lots of vaccine injury reporting, and then pivot to early treatment. So I'll stop here. I know you had a question. Yeah, go ahead. You know, the question is about shedding. The spike protein is found in CD16 monocytes and exosomes, maybe in secretions, but there's only one paper that's trying to make the claim that, in fact, that shedding has occurred, and I don't think it's valid. I've seen some minor things occur, but at this point in time, at the Texas Senate, the dean of the School of Public Health for UT Houston reported that the seroprevalence rate in Texas was 99%. 99% of people have antibodies now. So you get a little shedding, it's not an issue. Yes?
What about people who are donating blood?
It's the same thing. The seroprevalence pool is so high, I think it's a non-issue. But listen, we wrote the American Board of Clinical Blood Banking and the Red Cross early in 2021, me and some pathologists, warning them on this. So listen, you can't vaccinate people donating blood. And again, willfully blind. We got a nice response letter saying, thanks for your concern, but...
That they are passing on the antibodies, so it's a good thing for him to donate blood.
You know, the seroprevalence, 90, if you use a high-quality antibody assay against a receptor binding domain, in Texas with a huge sample, this guy was very clear a few weeks ago, 99% of people have them. Everyone's basically had exposure to this now. There's nobody who's really a virgin. Yeah.
So what do you say to the people who have been vaccinated other than don't get any more? I mean, a lot of people are afraid who've been vaccinated.
It's really hard, right? So people in our families have taken the vaccine. What I'm saying is we certainly can't ignore something. If one of our family members dies suddenly, we have to ask the question, did they take the vaccine and when? If they have signs and symptoms of blood clots, we better start checking ultrasounds. Chest pain, we start looking for myocarditis. We have to take everything seriously. I'm scared. Right now, you can't be unsurprised. If you had a family member take a vaccine, let's say you had a son or daughter take the vaccine because they felt like they had to for school or work, and they dropped dead suddenly, you can't be surprised at this point in time. Thousands of people have suddenly died. If they have a blood clot, if they become paralyzed, you can't be surprised. Now, the one thing I can tell you, the temporal relationship is pretty tight. It's usually within this first 30 days, and it becomes less and less. The more time goes by, nothing happens. Chances are they had a dud, like I described. So it's time related. The latest thing I've seen in my practice, which I'll tell you, just my anecdotal experience, is I have had a woman who's 5 months after J&J, a blood clot in the entire arm. Blood clot, arm turned blue. We had to take off the first rib and dig out the clot and what have you. 5 months. People have said, well, wait a minute, we're installing an oncogenic protein and cancers are going to be driven years later. That's possible. Listen, there's nothing good about this. There's nothing good. So if you tell me cancer rates are skyrocketing a year from now, I wouldn't be surprised. There's nothing that looks good. But I'm telling you, you saw basically in my age group, I'm only 11% of people. Everyone took it. What am I going to say to them? They were fooled. They were fooled. I hate to say it, but I wouldn't take one. You guys wouldn't take them, but they were fooled. They were duped. They were duped into taking them. I feel sorry for them. Do they have health worries? Yes. Hopefully, over time, they'll get out of it without any damage. Yeah.
Thank you for being a lion. My question is, do you know of any pathology labs that are doing postmortem S1 protein checks of tissue, either postmortem or is there a test that we can detect, like a white blood cell test, to see if S1 protein?
Yeah, so that's the company called Incell DX. You can go online, and Bruce Patterson, but he uses blood samples. And the pathology, the paper I showed you with spike protein in the heart was from Germany. And then the Ryan Cole Pathology Labs in Boise, Idaho, he's doing the most histopathologic work right now. But Incell DX, I think, is clearly in the lead. Bruce Patterson, by the way, who trained at Michigan, he's at Northwestern and Stanford. He's top flight, and he's really ahead of anybody right now out there. He's showing spike protein is related to these kind of long hauler symptoms.
I thought the Incell DX was looking at inflammatory markers.
But in the paper I showed you, he can actually identify S1 and S2 segment. But yeah, you're right, the panel has inflammatory markers. How about somebody over here, somebody in that? Yes, okay, you're standing up.
We didn't hear your answer to vaccinated and blood donations. And then the second question that I would have is, I have a number of patients that have lost their sense of smell and taste ongoingly and not to return. Do you have any suggestion for that?
Yeah, this loss of sense and smell, my experience is it comes back really, really late. It may take over a year. And those people actually are the ones that never did the nasal washes. So they just let the virus fry the olfactory nerve for 2 weeks. You just can't do that. You've got to spray some stuff up there and kill the virus. In terms of the donated blood, remember 99% seroprevalence rates, at least in Texas. That means everybody's got antibodies right now. Everybody's got antibodies. And so whether you donate blood or not, the hope is it mops up any spike protein that's circulating in somebody after being vaccinated. I think a prudent thing, if I was running the show, is I wouldn't let the vaccinated donate blood for a month based on the papers I showed you. We shouldn't do that. But again, the American Red Cross and the American Association of Clinical Blood Banking is willfully blind, meaning they're turning a blind eye to any safety issues. Yes, Dr. Crevier.
We know the CDC is not
Right. So the pharmacovigilance report from the World Council for Health. The question is, can anybody integrate all this data? Well, the World Council for Health pharmacovigilance report, by the way, that's the best report to show an employer. It's not my opinion. This is a worldwide body, says pull them off the market. They looked at 39 databases, 39 worldwide, and the 4 they rely on are VAERS, the UK Yellow Card system, the VigiSafe WHO system, and the UDRA system from Europe. Now, those are spontaneous reporting systems. What Dr. Crevier points out is we need a clinical occurrence system, which is different. Clinical occurrence means you actually know when they took the vaccine and then they're actually receiving routine care. That's DMED. And DMED is actually under a subpoena right now from Senator Ron Johnson when we testified to evaluate that. The DMED system is the only system right now, the clinical system, which is showing the increased signal for cancer. So we're going to have to follow that. There's a paper by Sharma, I believe, or Shaw and colleagues from University of Pittsburgh, showing that the S2 segment of the spike protein, the one that attaches to the nucleocapsid, that interferes with the P53 gene and the BRCA gene, BRCA gene. Those are tumor suppressor genes. So it's very tractable that vaccines could be cancer promoting. That's the great concern. Once you get past the risk of heart damage, blood clots, early neurologic damage, is to end up picking up that cancer risk later on. And the DMED is the system that's showing it. Remember, in the military, once they take a vaccine, they're expected to be in this maintenance program where they keep getting them. And that, if it is cancer promoting, that's what's going to happen. Keep taking a cancer promoting shot. And then if one's susceptible. Now, P53 governs kidney cancer and other solid organ cancers, and BRCA, breast cancer and female reproductive cancer. And I'll just say anecdotally in my practice, I've had several kidney cancers in heavily vaccinated patients where it's just clinically taken off. And I'm suspicious I have one sarcoma, which was clearly P53 related. Yes?
Are there parallel numbers for deaths, percent-wise, with J&J vaccine versus Pfizer and Moderna?
Every analysis shows that Moderna is slightly more dangerous than Pfizer for myocarditis death. Moderna's 100 micrograms of messenger RNA, Pfizer's 30 micrograms of messenger RNA, but everyone shows it.
How about Johnson & Johnson?
Johnson & Johnson's always a trailer. Same thing with AstraZeneca. But again, none of them, people have said, well, which is the safest one? Can I just hedge my bets a little bit? None of them are safe. I'm going to point out, listen, on my Twitter feed, if you go on it, you'll find a paper I posted by Burhild and colleagues in JAMA in the last 30 days. 3 Scandinavian countries, Nordic countries, Finland is one of them. 7,700 intracranial hemorrhages or major strokes after vaccination within 28 days. 7,700 neurologic vegetables in those 3 countries within 28 days of it. It's a very careful analysis. They excluded the respiratory infection. And they said, listen, the majority of the time is AstraZeneca, but they also use Pfizer and Moderna. I am telling you, it's in the open. There's no cover up here. It's in the open. Large numbers of people are being damaged by these. Yes, there's a bunch of questions. Let me go back over here. No, I haven't. Even the original studies I showed you by Menachery and colleagues, the University of North Carolina Chapel Hill studies, do you know the animals, when they give the animals SARS-CoV-2, they lost weight and their muscles got weak? The animals. They knew this would be incredibly debilitating. The average person loses weight with COVID, a considerable amount of weight, and it is disproportionately muscle weight that's lost. And the only thing we can hypothesize is the spike protein gets into muscles, people feel weak, and it's a vicious cycle. So we have to, I don't think prescription medications do much for this long COVID syndrome. I think it's much more in the nutraceutical and supplement realm and physical activity. Yes, you guys had strong questions back here.
Novavax is going to be rolled out as a safer alternative to the vaccines on the market currently. What's your opinion about Novavax?
I think Novavax, which is 5 micrograms of the spike protein, could be generally safer than Pfizer and Moderna. Their briefing booklet is far more honest. They says it does cause blood clots and it does cause heart damage. The problem is it's obsolete. That's the problem. It looks like it's completely coded. Even Novavax said it's probably going to be obsolete, just like Pfizer and Moderna is obsolete. So if Novavax gets approved, I think Pfizer and Moderna are dead. I think people are going to take Novavax as a safer alternative, but there's already been 1,000 Novavax deaths reported in the EU system. So we're just going to trade off to a new vaccine that still doesn't meet safety standards, slightly better than the other one. Yes, questions here. You stepped on the dog. Yeah.
Going back to the shedding issue, I have a 37-year-old female who is a masseuse. Wonderful marriage, athletic, eats organic, everything right. Gained 50 pounds, her body's a mess. And I said, how many patients do you touch a day? She said 25 to 30. And I said, with oil on your hands, right? This was last fall. And she looked at me with tears in her eyes. And she says, is it shedding? And I said, you tell me. And she said, I have to quit my profession. So shedding is very real, especially with people. I mean, think of oil on your hands, touching skin.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not disputing it. It's just that I really follow the scientific literature. And normally, you can't keep the scientific literature down. There would be just a ton of studies to confirm these observations, and they're not there right now. And I think the seroprevalence is really going to dampen that issue because everybody basically has antibodies now. Yes.
Can you talk about remdesivir and the fact that they're still using it on COVID patients that are in hospital, as well as the use for children and all the people that it's killed?
Right, so remdesivir, in November of 2020, WHO said do not use remdesivir. They called a consensus conference. They had scientists, clinical trialists, ethicists, and they put out a worldwide warning, do not use remdesivir, in November of 2020, because it results in more deaths, kidney injury, and liver failure. European Society of Critical Care agrees. At that point in time, Michigan should have pulled remdesivir off the market. So that is a failure. Instead, they actually put a 20% bonus on the hospital admissions, and they kept giving remdesivir. That's a sign, that's not just willful blindness. That's a sign of malevolence. That's a sign of personal injury. That's a sign right now that it's in the minds of people subconsciously to hurt other people. I think remdesivir is very much symbolic of that. And the other thing that was done, a lot of people don't know about this, in the Netherlands, for instance, and other countries, is euthanasia. And euthanasia was an example where, and there's been policy in some of these countries to do it. Yeah, I'll take one more question. You're a lucky one. But maybe instead of getting like a medical advice question, maybe can you just ask a general topic question? Yeah.
When you have a mentally ill patient who is on an antipsychotic either from from 1 to 3 or 4 of them at a time, and they are given the COVID vaccine in a hospital setting, and they say no to it, and they are still given the shot, is there anything that can be done about that?
I mean, to me, that's personal injury, right? That's like that's personal injury. Now, in Australia, they just passed law to say that if you undergo anesthesia, even if you don't want that vaccine, they're going to give it to you anyway. So you got to be really careful where this is going. But to me, that's personal injury or assault. Okay, I'll stop here. Thank you so much.